The stage is mine. So, yes. It's nice to have like a background music, but I don't actually mind. That's fine. So, I'm kind of pitching this as how developers can help designers build better products talk. The thing is, this isn't really like designer talk. This is more maybe like agile talk, which I don't know if agile these days, at least Scrum gets a bad rap these days, but I would also give a bad rap to designers. We already had like a short discussion how I feel about designers these days. But I'll get to why I feel how I feel and what I feel that developers could do better in software development projects. So a couple of words about me. So I'm Simo Virtanen and I'm a co-founder at Sakeus, which is we are a 3-person team established last year, 2022. We do product design and product development for companies of different sizes. We are mainly working as a team instead of doing work for hire as like singular freelancers or anything. So we aren't body renting single developers or designers. We are doing that as a team and like providing services for different sized companies. And yeah, I've been working in different software development consultancies since 2015. My longest tenure was 6 years at Kisco Labs. So I have a history with a lot of Ruby developers. And even at Sakeus, we are still developing with Ruby. And also I was like co-organizer of Eurocop last year in Helsinki. And this year we are organizing the Humanity Conference with Helsinki Ruby. And a couple of words about that after this talk. So how this isn't attributed to anyone really. I was thinking like, okay, what goes wrong in software development projects? And I think that someone somewhere has not been heard when something goes wrong. But bad software is always a result of someone like either saying or demanding things that the rest of the team doesn't agree with, but they go with that person's demands. Or it may be that a person in the team isn't voicing their opinions and isn't driving or steering the team towards the in the correct road. So, and this happens a lot. And I feel that, for example, a lot of developers just let the designers do the designs and then they implement it. And what happens then is like, well, truth be told, a lot of designers don't know what they're doing. They make a nice UI and so on, but it might, in many cases, may not actually be based on anything. They haven't maybe done any user research because the budget hasn't allowed that or anything. So it's good that like everyone in the team voices their opinions and sees like, hey, this is probably like gonna crash and burn sooner or later if I don't like say anything. And a lot of the things that I'm talking about this time is like based on this book by Jesse James Garrett. So the elements of user experience is like a really, really still a book worth reading, despite being released and published in 2002. And this is the book that I always come back to because a lot of the things that Garrett mentions in the book are on quite a high level, but it's like very easily digestible book about like, okay, this is the thing that the team has missed when the end result ends up being a bad one. So what Garrett speaks about in his book is that he divides the elements of user experience into 5 different layers. So where we should start looking at this is from the bottom. So at the bottom, we have the very abstract. We are like on the idea phase. We are thinking of the user needs and business goals. So we start from strategy. And then we go up. We start, after we have the strategy nailed down, we understand what the user needs and our business goals are. We can move to scoping what the functional content requirements for our software is. And then we can move on to information architecture, plan the structure, and move towards the concrete. So then we can do wireframing, get to the skeleton of of the application, and finally get to the surface, the user interface, the visual design of the app that we are developing. And if you look at this, where does the designer, the user interface designer come into play? Is here, quite close to the surface, the concrete face. So there's a lot of information that needs to be parsed before we get to the final app and how it should look like, how it actually works. We need to understand what are we actually solving and how are we actually solving it with the functional and content requirements. So, and this brings and I think that already here you can see that, hey, these are things that even a developer has to give input to. Like, for example, like the functional and content requirement. Developers have a huge part in defining the requirements, or actually they need to have have a say in the requirements, because scope also includes, of course, what is the budget for this project and so on. So different resources that are needed for the project to succeed. And moving between these different layers of getting into the from the abstract to concrete user experience, that you never jump from for example strategy to structure. You always are kind of going through different phases. Yeah.
That's actually not that intuitive to me, because in my experience, you have software like Just in Mind where you can kind of just jump into the other part, like its surface, and then work downwards, where you don't have a real framework. You just have something that's not functional that looks like it works but it doesn't. So do a lot of people go from the other side and then work backwards?
Yeah, for example, my experience as a designer has often been that the client comes in that they have the business need, and then we start doing the UI without it.
What if there's limited time? What if it's a hackathon and you have literally, and you're trying to develop something, you have literally a couple days or something? Is it possible to start from the skeleton and then go towards? Sorry, is it possible to start with the actual skeleton and then work
kind of from in between the phases? So just saying to the microphone, so that can you actually start from anywhere from this and kind of work your way backwards, and then and I think that that's sometimes it happens. I don't know if the results are good, because if you are and I think a lot of times companies do that, and I think a hackathon is a good example. It's a good point that in many cases, for example, if you go to Dribble and see, for example, some user interface designers' portfolio, they have usually gone with the interface design and visual design. It may not have any business goals behind it, and then sure, you can make a functional application from it, but is it actually solving anything if you are building something just as a portfolio piece? And so maybe that's the how to build actually something that people want to use. You have to start from the foundational layers and move your way up. But it's not necessarily that you always move forward. It's not it's not only forward motion. So you start from strategy, and what I'm trying to illustrate here with this being kind of widening at the bottom is that you never work on strategy alone. For example, if you are at this first phase, you are already starting the scoping phase as well, and then you might move forward, and scoping goes well, and then you're at the structure phase, but you are still kind of checking into the scope, and you are slowly moving on to the skeleton phase. But then you might need to go back to scoping, because then you recognize that there are some things that we need to check the requirements of, that we can't move forward to the next phase before we go back. But you always kind of better go in phases, or if you are on the surface, then you can't then something changes here, then you kind of like have to start over from here. Yeah. So we are moving kind of like this thing like might go towards and backwards until we get to the like very concrete stuff, and finally get the app out and released. And of course, this is never a linear process. And might be that in some cases you may have like different parts of the application that's the strategy remains the same, but these are like from scope onwards, you are kind of working on different layers with different teams because your organization is so huge. When it comes to succeeding in filling in these, that you actually get these phases or elements of your user experience fulfilled, the best way to do that is to assign responsibility of all those phases in the team that is working. It might be that you aren't, the expert of the strategy, but it might be your responsibility to check that, hey, are we working towards the strategic goal that our team was given? That we have some metrics that we need to succeed. I'd say that maybe perhaps this is the like product owner.
So how can a project manager with no technical background make this determination when only like the engineering lead could actually have any understanding of what needs to be built and what time frame that could be completed at?
Oh, I'm gonna get into that. Yes, good question. Like, how do you like know whether you need to like know these things if you don't have a technical background? And hey, I'm a designer who really isn't that technical person, but I kind of like see that as a designer, I'm kind of like, yeah, I do UI. Like, I've done plenty of UI design. I kind of like finding these days my like work getting like more on these like first 3 steps instead of the last 2 steps. But assigning the responsibility that there's someone always guarding that, hey, the things that we need to move forward to the next phase are already there, or that we are missing something, that hey, we don't have like a clear understanding of scope, for example. That you have someone who raises that point in the team. Because what happens if you nuke the scope here is that these people don't know. If you skip that phase, for example, like scope is like a very clear one. Like if you don't know the scope, the rest of the team has no idea what to do and how to actually like, when does it need to be delivered? What actually needs to be delivered? And then it's kind of haphazardly put together, and might be that you lose the communication line to the actual user needs and the business goals altogether. And that's why it's very important to have like a person who is assigned to take responsibility of that phase. And this doesn't need to be like, it might seem very like waterfally, but it really isn't. It's just like understanding on a higher level, because probably the actual development work and as well as the user interface work starts at the last 2 phases. And it's like split, like different paths have like their different scope requirements and so on. But so it differs. But like, let's imagine that we are actually like removing the structure here. Then, okay, what does the user interface developer designer do? And if we remove the surface phase, then we don't have like a visual design, which isn't necessarily like a bad thing when I think about it. Like, oh, if you have but in the end, what does visual design even mean? It just means that someone in the team has like made a user interface. It doesn't mean that we need to have a designer do the user interface. So what I would like to say is that it doesn't matter if you have like different roles in the team to fulfill these. You don't need to have like designers necessarily to build the skeleton or surface. I think like a full-on developer team could go through this process without any separate designers as well. And yeah, you mentioned there that like, okay, what does a person without like a technical background, like how can they do it? Well, I think that my like answer to that might be bit blasé in a way that, hey, sharing the understanding is like that you have the discussions and share the understanding of what you are building is the result. And this is why like I come from that like designer background where I think that designers should know how to discuss these things in technical terms with the developers. And I think that same applies to product owners, that they need to learn what delivering the software that they are building or managing. Yeah.
Bro, that's so true. I wish like more people like me. That you should blog about this.
Yeah. It's like, and then they don't like, for example, there's lots of like graphic designers who become like UI designers, and then they start doing service design, and then I think that a problem becomes apparent when they don't actually even try to understand the technicalities. They're like, oh, I have a graphic design background, or you have like a product owner who has like for example, in educational background, they worked as a teacher or something, and they come to their profession from the point of view where they are just kind of, oh, we are teaching the team to work efficiently, but they should know what they are building and how it's built. Like if you think of like Michelangelo, the Renaissance artist who like made like paintings and marble statues, it's like the guy knew marble. He knew how marble actually like works, and he like spent time to study how marble acts when he's like hitting it with a chisel. So I think like everyone is capable to have those conversations. You don't have to get like super deep into it, but you should have like enough understanding that you can have a conversation about it, and that you can critique the other person's, or not even critique, but make the other person explain what they are doing. As a designer, I'm like constantly making the developers like that they need to explain to me what they are doing, and I do my best to understand and look at the structure of the like project and so on to understand what they're doing, and then on like the same goes like the other way, that the like developer in our team at Sakeos is like, he is critiquing the designs, and we are having those like discussions about the design. So I think it's like encouraged that everyone knows a bit about everything. Of course, you need to like to deliver software. You need the like technical capabilities, and then you need other capabilities, like illustrated with the like blue background. Yeah, you need cross-disciplinary teams, but it doesn't mean that those are like silos. And that brings me to the like, I have the blinking blue lights here, which lasts for a few seconds before I can move forward to my points. I forgot about that. I left the animation there. Come on, how many seconds? Yes. So here's the point, that avoid the silos, that like, oh, designer does design and because everyone's working towards the same goal. Like if you look at like, what do they call the team in Scrum? It's development team. And I actually, if you know what the situation is with like designers getting hired, I think I solved the like designers like recruitment dilemma, is that they can always say that they are developers because they can work in the development team. But that's the like thing, that you shouldn't have like the silos at who's a developer and who's a designer and so on. Everyone is working towards the same goal. Might be that the competences are different. That some but I think like every designer should know something about coding, and they should be able to build at least like a rough prototype of what they need to like and how it needs to work. And again, explain and have the conversation with the developer. But also vice versa, that developers should be able to illustrate their, so getting like the building different aspects. And yeah, and this is like, yeah, the same thing, that you build a shared understanding of the aspects. So developers help designers understand technical terms, and don't be afraid of the technical terms. And designers shouldn't also be afraid of the technical terms and understanding how AWS integration works and what its role is in the app. Like I've had too many discussions with designers of what they don't do, whereas you should always encourage designers talk about how they can actually do anything, and same goes to developers. And yeah, dealing the responsibilities that support the competences. So as I said, not developers, not designers, but everyone works to the best of what they can do, but also that they are able to contribute to other aspects of the development. So as minimum, the designer should be able to go to the code base and do some text changes. They should be able to do that. Not they don't need to alert the developer who is probably working to solve a much harder problem. And yeah, challenge your team. So as I said at the beginning, that the bad software comes from someone not saying things aloud. That someone has not been heard. So challenge the team, ask questions, and get the that. If you're not sure, okay, what are we solving, or that this is a hazard if we build it this way, that we might end up, for example, with technical debt, which is something that product owners and designers may not understand, that if you take the short route, that you end up with technical debt. Be ready to have that conversation and be the expert that you are. And that's all I had to say about that. So if you need a product team, Sakeus can be found from the internet, as many companies can be found. So we are quite design focused, but as I said, we have been working and still do work with Ruby on Rails on many projects. Any thoughts, questions before we move forward?
Have you had any trouble with a designer coding too much?
Oh, yes. Yeah. But I don't see it as a bad thing. It's just it just needs someone to kind of, review what the designer is doing. But I think it's a positive thing that when designers code, every coder makes mistakes at the beginning. And so you should just treat the designers as junior developers if they don't have I think, because I always look at game development where there's no difference between the designer and developer. I'm a C64 kid, and it's the game credits is one person who did everything. So, and I think that web development has grown same way as game development. The complexity has gone up. So that's why we have now different roles with people who don't do development. And I'm one of those people who doesn't do development, but I try my best and still fail, but I try my best. But I appreciate when the developer is there to kind of, handhold me, and because then I learn. Well, if you have a designer who does too much development, then just make sure that the team has the resources to kind of follow up on the stuff that they are perhaps breaking in the process.
Yes, thanks.
All right.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
Regarding iterative and incremental development. So kind of now there's a small, if you look at the slides, there's the waterfall fallish vibe of it going from left to right, and of course when there's a single strategy for a product, and which then has a scope and structure and so on, it can be done like that you actually go and then a little bit overlap. But what then when you build small piece and then another piece and then you iterate on the pieces, how do they interact with this model? Do you have anything to say about that?
I see the whole like process that Garrett has like set there as that's kind of like the product-wide way of approaching it. So when it comes to like smaller things, then that's not really the answer. Like the elements of UX isn't really an answer when you are like doing smaller development and there's like smaller things. But I would say that because like if it's like new development, I think it would have to have the like new discussion about the scoping, and then it moves forward. And as you said, that like the strategy kind of like follows suit, that it's the same across the app. But of course, there are like changes. For example, it's the same app, but we are serving like a new user group within the organization. If it's like an internal tool for some organization. So, well, Vesa, we've been building these sorts of apps where the user group and user needs differ, but it's kind of serving the same organizational strategy. And then we do the scoping based on that user group's needs. So I think like it does go through that whole pipeline in the end. It's just that the side that how we experience it is way like it's like a very short span of time. And when you put it on a slide on like a HDTV, it looks like it's very waterfally and it takes a long time to get through the whole pipeline. But in the end, like those decisions might be that those are done like in like a very short span of time. You go through the pipeline, but it might be that it's one meeting where you go through everything until the actual development phase.
Yeah, because I was thinking the same. Like I don't remember if it's in the book. Like I've read it, but it was like 15 years ago, so I don't remember anything of it. But you kind of like you start from the concrete, and then like, is it there? If there's some like visual thing, then like okay, you can do it on that level. But if it's like higher, you go as high as it goes, and then you like process from there to the concrete, and kind of like. I guess that's how it goes, but like when you change the abstract levels, they affect the concrete levels. So if you like totally change you pivot your product, then might be that you throw everything to the trash. Like nothing on the visual level serves anymore, and like then but it might be usually it goes to scope, and then you like kind of like what are the features that we need to serve, and then you go from there to the visual.
Yeah, you raise a good case where like whole product strategy changes. So what happens to the like development so far? Like if you are quite close to releasing it, for example, and then everything changes on like a very fundamental level, and it should go to crash. But what we already invested so much in it. Well, you're gonna over the years you're gonna be investing even more. And also it doesn't fit your strategy, so why are you actually releasing it? So again, I go back to the game development where publishers kill projects all the time because they no longer they don't have like a product market fit anymore, for example, or that they realize that it just doesn't work. But especially I kind of feel this is just a like gut feeling that especially in Finland. Startups preach the fail fast method, but we are already invested in it. So let's just get it out the door and see if anyone wants to buy in. But we don't have any more like money to put into marketing or anything. But it's on it's in the internet. People will find it. Never happened, I think.
One short question. About the team structure, I like this idea of like working as one big team and like everyone seeing they're in a way responsible for the one big thing. But like what I've seen so far, sometimes in the teams there are members who are like coming from like backgrounds where the roles are very narrow and like they know their own role and like they are experts in that. Like how do you reason that like it should be maybe like there should be, for example, more discussions. There should be more sharing about what we do, and like how do you reason that? Like, do you tell them to read the book, or like what's your approach?
Yeah, I wish it was so that easy that, hey, go and read a book once in a while. And like, yeah, because that's a hard problem to have, is that like, and yeah, and even if you're doing like a Scrum or something, and then you are taught that, hey, the user stories are written in a user-centric way, and or that user does this. And I've been in teams where the developer is like, oh, just give me a task list of what I need to do. And I don't want to say that you need to be the one to adjust to it, because that's not like a good team dynamic. It's overall, it's not a good team dynamic if someone is like very, very like just secure in their own base, because that doesn't help necessarily the rest of the team to understand what they are doing. Maybe my like answer here is that if they are not kind of like open to kind of contributing to everyone else's fields, then at least that they could contribute to everyone else's understanding of what they do, so that the rest of the team can utilize their like competences the best way they can. That like, but yeah, also tell them to read a book once in a while. Like, it could be this one, but it could be something else as well, and something else that isn't like, you know, the like latest Rails spec or something. So something less technical for once in a while. Not everyone might be happy, and I'd say that at least avoid a situation where things like don't get addressed. So like that people don't ask questions from this like person, because it's easier not to ask questions and get them to explain. Like I would imagine that these people are actually passionate about the thing, that because they are specialists, they are actually like very passionate about the thing.
Like maybe sometimes it seems that like it is all the discussions, they are sometimes seems as waste. Like we could be like more effective if we just do our own part, and like in the long term, it's of course quite understandable that, like for example, doing the right things matters way more than, for example, implementing something really fast.
And I see the value in like everyone does what they do best and they deliver that. But I would encourage that, hey, at least that everyone understands if something is missing from that implementation, that other people than this specialist can point that out.
Yeah, I was kind of thinking about the word responsibility, and then the slide with the different steps.
Yeah.
And it kind of looks like, you know, the visual designer is not part of the strategy meetings, but maybe that's not the point.
That's not the point.
The PM is the one responsible for, you know, organizing those customer interviews and gathering the requirements and so on. And the other people can be part of those meetings and maybe should be part, but they're not strictly responsible for, you know, that section.
Yeah,
in the same way that the designer can code the code base, but he's not really responsible for, you know, that the code works.
Correct. So so it might be that someone is responsible, but not like that people take as best as the situation allows, take part in the discussions about all those phases. But I also like illustrated that those are separate people, but might be that like you, for example, would have responsibility of, like in a small team of several of those steps and not just one.
If design is not considered technical, why is it so frustratingly difficult? Like, I can't really refine that question anymore, but like it's I wish it wasn't true, but it seems to be true. Like,
because it's a human problem.
There's books about like the principles of good design that people that are extremely technical have difficulty digesting. Like, can you say more about this?
Well, design is like a human problem. You can solve like very like clear mathematical problems, like a lot of code is there. It's kind of like it makes concrete a very like abstract problems in there. But but yeah, like design is purely human issue. That like the bad design is like a gut feeling. Like they're okay, like this doesn't feel good. There's no like exact science what is good design. All right, I'll move forward. So I mentioned about being an organizer for an event. So I'll speak a few words about Ode to Humanity. How many have heard of Ode to Humanity so far? And how many have tickets to Ode to Humanity? Exactly. Thank you, Esa. It's not a design conference. Also, it's not a Ruby conference. It says here, Leo, it says Software Developers Conference. And so Ode to Humanity will be organized in Lasipalazzi on October 13th, Friday. So great chance to be there because it's Friday. And we have great talks. So Anil Dash is going to be giving the keynote. Me and Matthias know what the topic probably is, but it's going to be a surprise to everyone else. But I'd say that alone would be worth the price of admission. And then otherwise, like, we have a very wide array of talks. So, for example, some tools for your day-to-day work as the developer in Dave Kiss's Art of Storytelling for Developers and Nicole Tipaldi's how to leverage the non-technical experience. So if you, for example, have like experience from outside the developer's domain, then Nicole will be talking about how to leverage that. And then Jaakko Koivula is going to be talking about how sociology can be used to its advantage in software development. And then we have a talk by Ariel Fox about design research in humanitarian and human technologies. And then Janne Kalliola is going to be giving a talk about the greenhouse gases that the IT and software development create these days. So quite a wide array and different topics about like social issues in software development. And now we have a special ticket price for Ruby Brigade attendees. And feel free to share this in your communities, work communities, and so on. So with the code Ruby Brigade or using that QR code, you can get the ticket for 99 euros. And regularly it's 129 euros. And that's valid until the end of the week. So we really appreciate if people show up and we just want this to become like a great community event around very like important topics that kind of may, if you are very like focused on just the development aspect, it might be good to broaden your mind. No need to read a book. You can listen to his talks. And we'll share the slides and the link to get the tickets for the special price to you. And also the sponsor of the event, we have Helsinki Ruby. So we are looking for members, and when did we establish Helsinki Ruby? 2021. And what we are doing is like, making these events like the Ruby Brigade meetups possible, and other events. So to have these is so that if you become member, you can actually take part in making these events happen. Also, the awesome benefit of getting Helsinki Ruby enamel pin to show your colors, and then also both in the annual organization meetings, where we actually discuss like what sort of events to organize, and so we welcome everyone. They take part, even if they are not Ruby developers. I'm not a Ruby developer, and I'm a member, so everyone's welcome. And you can go to helsinkiruby.fi. It's like there's a system. You can just click and become a member very, very quickly. And there's also like support memberships for organizations. So if your workplace is interested in becoming a Helsinki Ruby member, then there's a separate package for that with more enamel pins. And we also, for the Ode to Humanity conference if your company is interested in taking part as a sponsor, we are looking for sponsorships, and the code that we showed there also gives discount for the digital sponsorship, which enables that we put the company's logo on our website, and that shows that the company is supporting the cause. But we also have other sponsorship packages for the conference. All right, that's everything from me.